Welcome. Good afternoon. My name is Jamie Bernstein, and I have the honor of serving as the Executive Director of the Supreme Court of Texas Children's Commission. I want to wholeheartedly welcome you to today's webinar, which is entitled Supporting Reunification in Child Welfare Cases. As you may be aware, June is Reunification Month, and while the child welfare system should always maintain urgency to keep children safely with families, this month offers us an opportunity to spotlight this critical issue. This presentation today will be provided by three incredible panelists: the Honorable Andrea James, Judge of the Second Region Child Protection Court Number 2, Jessica Bills, Regional Parent Liaison, and Jennifer Perkins, Assistant Public Defender in the Family Civil Division in Dallas. Any materials provided by these presenters will be made available for download on the Children's Commission On-Demand Training and MCLE webpage. For those of you watching the live presentation, the Q&A feature is available for this webinar, and questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation if time allows. Additionally, the MCLE course number will be provided at the end of the presentation. And if you're watching this webinar on replay, you can email cctraining@txcourts.gov for MCLE self-reporting information. It's now my pleasure to turn over the presentation to Judge James.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am very honored to take part in today's presentation, and we've got a lot to cover, so we're just going to get right into it. I'm going to ask these folks some questions, and then we'll have some conversation about their answers. And there's a lot of lived experience and a lot of very significant experience to share with y'all. So, ladies, after a child is removed from a parent, how can everyone involved in the case set the expectation that the case is moving towards reunification? And Jennifer, I'd like to start with you.
Well, that's a big question. We could talk about that for a long time. I think that from an attorney's perspective, it's also a very loaded question because it differs, the time frame differs for us and when we actually know who our client is and that we're going to be appointed on the case. Sometimes we're very fortunate and maybe we've represented the parent before and we know immediately when the affidavit's going to be presented that we represent a parent. And in that situation, we have sometimes a little bit of time to talk with the DA, talk with the case manager, hear a little bit more than just the facts of the affidavit removal and removal affidavit, and we could start building a coalition with the team. And by that time, I already know my parent. So I know what my parent's strengths are. I know what my parent's weaknesses are, and I'm going to come full throttle with the strengths that I've already discussed with her and because I've known her or him before. And I'm going to say her generally because I generally, when I represented parents, represented moms. The problem is when you get appointed at the adversary hearing and there's already been a lot of things happening in the case and you are just coming on. In that situation, the first and foremost thing you need to do, in my experience, to begin the conversation around unification has to do with just meeting your parent and listening to what questions they have and building out a roadmap for them and going over each line of the affidavit with them. And then when you get their strengths, start building that coalition for the next hearing.
Jessica?
Thank you, guys. I'm really excited to be here. So I believe it starts with the judge and how they handle their cases and how they conduct their courtroom, like how their demeanor is, their words, their attitude towards parents, and the boundaries that they set in their courtroom. So when you allow or don't allow things to happen in the courtroom, I feel like it shifts how, since you're up here and the caseworkers say down here, like it shifts how everyone acts and how they address parents. So like if an attorney only sees a parent like 5 minutes before every court date, that they don't feel validated, they don't feel supported, and they don't feel like the attorney is for them. And like when caseworkers are all grouped up and whispering, like parents know that the caseworkers are talking bad about them. So there's a big power dynamic, I felt like, that makes parents feel like they can't possibly gain reunification. So even if they work their services, get clean or sober, get stable housing, whatever it may be, they still feel like they can't obtain reunification. So I was going to share a little bit of my experience. I hired an attorney right before my court, and that evening he asked me to come have drinks in his hot tub, and I'm like, no, I'm not going there. And needless to say, he didn't show up for court for me the next day. I cussed at the judge on my first court date. I was still high on meth. I was extremely confused, and I was triggered because no one ever asked, like, were you a youth in the system? And I was. So I was like really triggered. I was scared. Um, so the DA asked me, okay, where's your attorney? I'm like, I don't know. And so he gave me the paper. I filled it out quick, and he's like, okay, well, what attorney do you want? And just so happened that a man walks in with a suit on, and I'm like, him. And I thank the Lord for him every day because he was an amazing attorney. Um, but I had an amazing judge as well that when I started getting clean drug tests, she celebrated that for me. Like she made me feel validated. She encouraged me. And I felt like I had a little bit of hope, like I could gain reunification. And then she started to get onto the caseworkers for whispering, and it became like a fight between mine and my kid's attorney against CPS because they wanted me to get the kids back. To the point where my judge was like, "Why are y'all emotionally invested in this case so much? Like, stop! This is ridiculous. Just stop." And I love that personally because I felt like, oh my gosh, I have a chance that I can get my kids back. But seeing a judge that celebrated my accomplishments, like I said, the clean drug tests, um, just validated me. I didn't have a support system really growing up, nor then. So when she showed kindness to me, even though I had cussed her out, she forgave me. She moved past that. Like it just made me feel like reunification was in my grasp and I could do it.
I will tell y'all from my perspective, really, what Jessica said is true. The court really does set the tone, and empowering parents to succeed should not be underestimated. And please call them by their names. Don't call them mom or dad. Call them Miss Smith, Mr. Jones, whatever. Let them know that you see them as an individual, and be consistent. Hold everybody accountable. I call it my goose gander rule. Just be clear with your expectations. Um, so, all right. What can judges and attorneys do at the adversary to encourage reunification? Jennifer, I want to start with you this time.
I think this is the most important thing, and Jessica's already talked about it a little bit. That client, if you're doing this work, it's because families are important to you. And if families are important to you, reunification is the first thing that we're always going to attempt to make happen. And so my client is someone who I want to be educated about the court system, understand the roles of the different players, what the judge's role is, what the department's role is, what the guardian attorney ad litem's role is, and what our role is. Most parents that are involved in this type of litigation have no idea what legal speak is. You need to teach them so that they understand. You also need to educate the court on your client. You need to know her background, his background. You need to know what their aspirations are, what things they were doing that were good in the home, and teach your client to the court, teach your client to the department. And make sure that it's not only the department that is expressing their need and their want and their desire based on their petition. You can file motions, you can have affirmative requests on file with the court, and make sure that your client gets equal time. Another thing that I think is very, very important is to teach your client about physical testimony. Jessica already talked a little bit about that, both verbal and physical, when she cussed out the judge. Thank goodness she had a judge that understood why she might feel that way. But it's very frustrating for parents when a lawyer does all the talking for them. They don't understand why they can't talk and give their side of the case. And sometimes there are opportunities for that. And I encourage my clients to do that. But there's also ways they can get in trouble. So you need to let them know when they're going outside the parameters of what they should be educating the court on, either touch them on the arm, let them know, and bring them back in. I think the one succinct answer in this is meet your client, give your client time, tell them the calendar that they're going to be under in this litigation, tell them all the different possibilities for outcomes, and let them ask questions of you so that they feel when they walk in that they're educated about what's going to happen.
Jessica?
So I think the adversary hearing, you're talking about the 14-day one, correct?
Mhm.
So for me, that was so soon, like after the trauma of the removal, that I was still in my addiction. I didn't understand anything that anyone was saying to me. It was like speaking Chinese cursive. It made no sense. I felt intimidated. My kids were just removed, so it's kind of hard. You just took my kids. No, yeah, now I'm going to stop doing drugs, so it was a process for me to get clean. But I think that you can encourage parents that CPS is just a temporary solution to what you don't want to be a permanent problem. I believe if it's looked at that way, instead of that CPS is a permanent solution to what is a permanent problem, because a lot of parents with the right support and resources, including myself, can definitely change. And I would also say that remembering the parent you're meeting at the adversary hearing is not the parent that you're going to be meeting at the permanency hearing and the second permanency hearing. And that's like a really good way to gauge if your parent is getting the right resources and getting connected and the caseworkers, working with them. But if there's no change, there's probably a root problem of why there's no change. And so I would definitely, even at that 14-day mark, encourage parents, hey, you can do this. We're going to help you do this, celebrate the little bit of growth and change, that you see. Even if you don't see anything, you can always find something good to say about somebody to encourage them. So I think that coming out of that trauma, still in that trauma, you can say things to help a parent move past that into working their services or reaching out for help from anybody. So I think it's a detrimental time at that 14 days of how y'all approach parents, if they're going to go left or right, if they're going to do the right thing or not.
I like to let everybody know by saying out loud that everybody's on equal footing. The department doesn't always get what the department wants. Parents don't always get what the parents want. Everybody's on legal footing. It's a level playing field, so to speak. And also, I think it's very important for judges to set your expectations for everybody, not just the parents, but the caseworkers, the CASAs, the lawyers, that you're going to hold everybody's feet to the fire. There's statutory deadlines. There are certain things that need to be filed in a certain time frame. So, and then if you say it out loud, you better hold yourself to it as well. All right. Jessica, I want to start with you on this one. How does the development of the service plan and the status hearing itself impact whether parents are on the path toward reunification?
Well, I think addressing that there's a big misconception about services, especially in rural areas. Like, one, there aren't many. Two, the wait time to get services can be extremely long. And just because CPS says to it or a judge orders, hey, you need to go to rehab, doesn't mean that a parent can even get into rehab. So for me, my kids were taken on January 2nd of 2016, and I was high at my family group conference. I was with my best friend who was high as well. I didn't have any support. I felt hopeless in that meeting, and I left feeling, even more hopeless instead of encouraged. So I went to the rehab myself finally, and I did the assessment because I was tired of waiting on the referral from the CPS worker, and I was able to get in. Well, then after that, I had an encounter with the Lord, and I was freed from my addiction. So I would have been 28 days sober going into rehab. So I sat outside the day I got called that I could go, and I sat outside in my car, and I had a pill and a beer. And I'm like, I have to take this because they're going to test me and I won't be able to get into rehab. I have to test positive for something. So 3 hours later, finally, I'm like, I have to. And so I took that pill, which could have triggered my addiction all over again, but I had to do it so I would flunk that drug test. And so I think that just having an understanding that your case, just because a caseworker says, hey, you need the service, or the judge, that's not reality. Yeah, and just holding the caseworker accountable to the time frame it takes for them to give out the referrals, because I think that's a big issue for parents.
Jennifer?
It's hard to follow up on that because that is one of the realities that we see in Dallas too, that parents have to be testing positive to get services, get inpatient. I think that one of the things that happens that's detrimental to a parent is when there's a cookie cutter service plan put in place. We don't need to use the same service plan for every parent and every family. We need to make sure that we understand what the challenges are that this family is facing and match the services that we ask the court to order to those deficiencies. I want to go back to the other question just for a minute when we were talking about how we help parents feel like they want to come back next time. Even if they're not doing anything that we are hoping they will do, they showed up. And I think that's a huge barrier to overcome. And I think that many times appearing for the service plan also carries with it those fears and uncertainties and what's going to happen here. What am I agreeing to? And so that's where attorneys really need to step in and go to that service plan meeting if they can. That doesn't happen a lot in our county, but if you can do that, you need to be there because the service plan needs to fit your client's and his or her children's needs, not be a cookie cutter plan.
For the judges out there, ask the parents what they think they need. If there's something else that you can do that they can help, or if there's something that they think they really, really don't need. It's important that they know that you're listening to these services and what's being asked of them. And it's as important for the judges to know the purpose of the services and probably far more important for the parents to understand the purposes of the services. All right, Jessica, I'm going to start with you again on this one. At the first permanency hearing, judges have to consider whether the child can be safely returned home. In your experience, what does that look like?
So for me, helping people here in Abilene, like parents, hundreds and hundreds over the years, I've never seen that happen. I've never seen a parent get their children back that quickly. Now, I served at a ministry for 2 years as a live-in house mom, and that was a maternity home for women. It was well supervised, all that. So I would see some of the moms get their kids back only because of that environment, with the understanding of having a safety plan, with the understanding if you leave, the workers that immediately call 911. So for me, I never see this outside of that ministry.
Okay, Jennifer?
I think the time between the status hearing and the first permanency hearing is so pivotal. If you can get your client involved in the services, get them working services, get them the supportive services they need, like if it's transportation, or if there is a need not only for individual counseling, but the family altogether, if there is need for trauma-informed training with the children, whatever it is that's been ordered that fits your clients, the family's needs, if you can show that there's been compliance with that at the first permanency hearing, if you can show that because of this compliance, the initial danger is remediated or even gone, then whether or not the child actually returns at that permanency hearing, you set really the roadmap for the rest of the litigation. Because judge sees that your parent is working really hard to do the things that would put them in a place to be a safe provider for their child. But I also think at this point it's very important for a parent's attorney to walk in with, this is the plan that we have if the child returned right now. And that won't work in every case, but in some cases, you're ready to start thinking about, this is what we see. We think that we can attain this within the next few months and get everybody thinking about monitored return, because that's a very valuable tool for a lot of families. I think that's the most important thing.
I think too, having, from the judge's perspective, having a plan, obviously there's subjective and objective criteria with the service plans, but having the parents understand it's not checking the boxes, but these are the behaviors that you as the judge are looking for, the sustained change. And maybe it's not a return home at the initial permanency, but maybe you start talking about, hopefully, at least unsupervised periods of possession, that they're developing a plan moving forward, a very tangible, well understood, easy to absorb plan to get these children home to a safe parent. Jennifer, this is mostly directed to you. How can attorneys support reunification during mediation?
So for me, and this may just be a personal thing, but for me, the number one thing is have that mediation in person. I know that a lot of people are very successful with the virtual mediation, so that's great. But what I found is the parent gets a lot more time with the mediator if they are in person. So that's the first thing I like to ask for, is an in-person mediation. Second of all, the attorney needs to have prepared their client for the mediation just like you were doing it for trial. The client needs to understand what a mediation is, what the process, what it is you're trying to achieve, what we need to show the department. Hopefully they already know, but to show the department what services you have completed, what permanency you can provide right now for your children, and how you can make sure that they continue to get any services that are still needed. So you need to walk in with a lot of stuff. You need to have, if your client's working, you need to have proof of that. You need to have proof of housing and how that's being paid for. You need to have certificates of completion, and perhaps the department already has some of these things, but you need to present them as documents that support where your client wants to be. And it's not this mediation is certainly not trial, so you don't want to give up all the wonderful things, but it's a time for the department to understand even better how committed your client is to getting their children back, and it's a thoughtful presentation of how that would look. It's oftentimes exactly the right time for a motion for monitored return. Your client needs to know everything that's going to happen in the mediation, needs to understand what certain language means, needs to understand what conservatorship means, what possessory conservatorship is versus managing conservatorship. They need to understand what termination means. Sometimes you'll go into a mediation and you already know that the department's plan is termination. In some cases, that will be the right answer for your parent because you could have a little bit of power to kind of tailor make that so it's not as difficult as it would be for a jury or a court to do that. So your client needs to understand what the possible outcomes are. They need to be able to ask you questions about how that would look in real life. They need to understand what the department is wanting from them post-monitored return or post-return to your home. It's a very valuable time if the preparation is there and your client understands what's about to happen.
Jessica, from a parent's perspective, any thoughts about mediation?
No, I'm good. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Have a plan. Go with your computer and have options. You never can underestimate the power of planning ahead, as Jennifer said. All right. Jessica, I'm gonna start with you on this one. What support do parents need during and after a monitored return?
My goodness. So this is where my passion lies because this was the hardest time for me. I was in sober living. My kids came for their unsupervised visit on Friday. I moved out of sober living on Saturday. We moved into a single mom's home, and that was a monitored return. And I had no idea what I was doing. Um, stepping back out into technically kind of the real world. My kids were so confused because here I used to be their best friend. Then I had this big change in my life. Now I'm sober. And they're like, Mom, you're not any fun anymore. What's wrong with you? Like you're no fun. And then they manipulated me a lot and I allowed that and I parented out of guilt, for a long while. And I would even say like maybe I should call CPS and I would be bawling. Maybe I should call them. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to be not your best friend and your mom. And so we'd all sit on the floor and we would cry and then we would pray. And finally, I had enough. I told them, no, no, y'all are done manipulating me. We're going to figure this out. We're going to work it out together. So we would sit on the floor, we would cry, we'd pray together. And we fought through it. And that's where I feel like my family is super blessed because we didn't just gain reunification, we have genuine restoration as a family. And there's a big, big difference. And so it was all hard though. It was really hard. And then when we moved into our own place, just it was just all hard and unnecessary. And I was too scared to call CPS and say, I need some help. I don't know what I'm doing. Even though I was saying I was going to call them, I really wouldn't have. But I was scared that they would take my kids again. And so like I said, thank goodness for my good attorney, my kid's good attorney. Um, but still that's not enough. I feel like parents need to be supported through that, checked on, especially I know that peer support to me is important. But there's something lacking there. And I think that's why we have repeat cases.
Jennifer?
I just add that I think the transition from the CPS services that are offered during a monitored return to mom having to provide her own services is one of the biggest hurdles to get over. And so when Jessica says she needs to be checked on, we need to check on our clients. We need to make sure that they have a wealth of understanding about what services they can begin to use during that transition. I know United Way has lots of supportive family services that our clients can get on their own after the department is out. I've had such good results with Heart of Courage, which is their prior foster parents, I'm sorry, prior parents that have gone through the system that then have provide peer support. And they also are very well connected with services for your client. So it's not only the department that needs to check on your client, you need to check on your client. You need to see your client, see if they are able to cope with their day-to-day responsibilities. They can get wraparound services while the department is still involved. They can get wraparound services from their mental health authority after they're gone. And it doesn't hurt for you to check on your client even after the case is over and they receive their children back in terms of services and how that's working out for them.
Jessica?
Oh, I'm sorry. Are we on the peer support question or the?
The impact of peer support. Yeah, I
Okay,
started with you. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, y'all. So people get tired on our parent groups of hearing me say this probably on the state level, but I believe that 100% peer support is the missing piece of the child welfare system in Texas. I think it's extremely important. I felt like when I was in court, no one really took me serious or listened to me, and then my recovery coach went to court with me and started speaking on my accomplishments and the choices I was able to make on my own, whether I failed or succeeded in those. I got to choose how I wanted the trajectory of my life to go. And when he started speaking, it changed the whole dynamic of even the CPS workers. They were like, oh, okay. And I'm thinking, why are they listening to him? Like they're actually listening. And I told him on the drive back to Abilene, I was like, I want to be you one day. And so I am. I'm a recovery support peer specialist and a mental health peer specialist. And I'm so grateful for him. I know right now, like peer support is kind of a field that's teetering on being a real, like I feel like there should be more jobs for peer support, but they're few and far between. So I do teach the parent support group here called Parents Empowering Parents. So outside of that role, I volunteer to do peer support services with families for zero pay, but it's okay. I know one day that's going to work out for me. But you guys wouldn't believe how many parents call almost every day. I have a parent calling me when more people start coming to the class. It gets overwhelming because parents want to see someone that's been through what they're going through and has come out on the other side. It's just really empowering to them. Right now, I have one parent that's court ordered to come to my class, so I do peer support services with her. And she came to class the other day or last month, and she was crying and she gave me a hug. She said, "I don't know what she said to the judge, but it changed everything." And she's like, she gave me that extension. She's like, she wasn't going to do that till I started working with you. And we also have a dad that has a 15-year-old, no, 18-year-old, 15-year-old, 14-year-old, 5-year-old, 4-year-old, 1-year-old. I told him he needs a new hobby, but he just got his three youngest ones back on a monitored return. And I'm so proud of him, especially dads. I believe that they have it really hard. But I've built relationship like with him and his family. So his kids, he's consecutively come to our class for 9 months now, every month. His kids come, his daughter draws me pictures. I reached out to him the other day and I was like, what do you need to make sure your monitored return is successful so you can get this case closed? And he's like, I just need housing. He's like, I have a house, but we have to move out. And fortunately, my daughter just moved to New Mexico. So I was like, maybe you should call her. She might want to rent it out. So she did. She rented it out to this dad and his family and girlfriend. And so they're moving in on the 1st. And he's just so grateful. And he said when he came to our class, like at first on the DFPS website, he thought it was a hoax because he couldn't get a hold of DFPS. And then finally he did. And then he was able to get a hold of me. And he said just by coming to our class, like he's just so empowered. He's educated now in the child welfare system. Like he felt like he wasn't so confused. Like he could actually do this because he had the knowledge and the power and a good support system. And so I see a lot of successful families that come through that I feed into from the peer support role. So I cannot say enough that I believe that's the missing link for the child welfare system.
Don't underestimate the power of kindness. All right, what's the role of caregivers in the reunification process? I'm going to start with you again, Jessica.
Okay. So as far as like I hope I got this right in how I'm thinking about for like kinship placement caregivers. I know for me, my mom was mainly the one that always called CPS on me, and I've had 23 different investigations throughout my life. And I didn't have the support system to be like, oh, Jessica, you need some help. You're a single mom, oh, you might be struggling. Where can we fill in the gap for you? It was like, okay, we're calling CPS. And so I see a lot how damaging that can be when kids are placed with grandparents that the reason the parent is dysfunctional is because of their upbringing. And so I see a lot of trauma around that. I worked at the local mental hospital here, and it's a lockdown facility. I had one mom that her mom called CPS on her again. She jumped out of a moving vehicle. And I worked with another mom that the grandma had the kids, the daughter, relapsed. And instead of helping her out, she called CPS. And this young lady tried to hang herself, and it wasn't successful. And when I met her in the hospital, like mental hospital, she had a trachea, and she was just devastated because I feel like that causes a lot of division. If we're going to reunify families, we can't pick and choose which area we're going to restore, so leaving kids with grandparents but leaving division between the mom and the daughter, to me it doesn't make any sense. I feel like there needs to definitely be more collaboration between foster parents and birth parents. I hope that our state is at this last reunification conference, it was a big topic, so I hope we start to step into that more. Because for me, when my kids were in placement, I begged my attorney to please get it to the judge where they wouldn't go into foster care because I knew I wasn't being a good mom, through my addiction. And I thought that if they had foster parents, that they would never want to come back home to me. And so us birth parents, look at foster parents like they're rich, they have it all together. Now I know better. Being on the other side, I know they're just people like we are, but I think that collaboration is definitely missing. And then as far as placement, I think there needs to be more accountability. Like where my kids were in placement, my daughter ran away 3 times. She called me from the Walmart the first time. I called CPS. I got in trouble, even though I didn't have a protective order, but for answering her phone call. Second time she ran away, couldn't get a hold of CPS. So here she is at the Walmart. She ended up hitchhiking, almost made it all the way to Brownwood. She made it to Bangs. I went there. The police officer was nice enough to let me see her for a minute. I got in trouble again. The third time, her boyfriend and friend stole a car from Brownwood, went and broke her out of the placement, and they made it to Brownwood that time. My daughter just wanted to come home, and she didn't understand, So I think that the role of caregiver in all those areas needs to be more about collaborating with the birth parent.
Jennifer, what's your perspective from representing parents and children with caregivers?
Well, my perspective is Jessica has the best answers, just the best answers. I hate that she had the lived experience, but love what you're doing now, Jessica. But I think that what we're hoping for, Jessica, in the state of Texas is that there will be more caregiver alignment with parents. There are several agencies that are working toward that end. I know Safe Babies is one in Dallas, where the foster provider will go through, I guess it's training, but time together with the children and the mother, based on their ages. This is based on little ones, and work together to help children that are facing trauma, well, just adverse effects from the trauma, need to be around mom. Mom's not quite ready for monitored returns, so caregiver is working with her on the responses to the problems that the child is having and work towards a collaborative time moving towards unsupervised visitation is the hope earlier in the process. That sounds like maybe you needed that but more for an adolescent response with your children, and somebody that would step up and be there with you and be there alone with you and your daughter. Maybe that would have been helpful. But those kinds of things are something that are very, very needed. I think they give parents that are going through the system a lot of hope, just like what we were talking about, peer support. They give parents hope. It's a long, hard process, as Jessica has testified to. And any little ounce of hope that we can give these parents is something that we need to fight for.
Mhm. Jessica, I'm gonna go to you again first. What is a reunification ceremony and why is it important?
Well, I can say this. When I would be in court and I would see adoption ceremonies going on with balloons and all this clapping and all this happiness, I felt really conflicted. Being a youth in the system, I had amazing foster parents. It was short. It was a short amount of time I was in a foster home. So I'd be happy for these kids, that they had this going on. But at the same time, it brought so much shame on me and so much guilt. Like, oh my gosh, we can celebrate this because they're getting adopted. I'm like, that's kind of sick thinking. I would be thinking to myself. And then when I got my kids back, it was just like, here you are, here are your kids back. Good job. Pat, not even a pat on the back, from anyone. So I firmly believe that reunification ceremonies are very important just to balance out that power struggle that goes on in court. Parents need to be celebrated. We've been through a lot, so to get to a reunification, all the things that it entailed to get there need to be celebrated. I think it's very important. And I was telling these nice, sweet ladies on here earlier that being on the parent collaboration group, that's something I desire to do is hopefully create a ceremony, a reunification celebration like template and facilitator guide certificates and make it all unified, across the state. I think it's very important.
All right, I think we're good on time. So, what does reunification look like after termination? Jennifer, I'm going to go to you first.
I've actually had some really good experience with that in my courts. I'm assigned to a court right now that is a permanency court, specialty court, and our judge oftentimes will ask about the parent even if the parent's been terminated, especially if you're having significant behaviors with the children that they identify as because they really, really miss their parents. And we've had successful reunifications where the parents appointed as a conservator and a non-parent conservator. So I've seen it work very, very well. It's not something that's common yet, but I know that when I was working with parents and we came to the realization that termination was the most likely result, that we would start talking about the possibilities that, well, the biggest one is that lots of children, when they reach 18, come home. But the other one that I talked to them a lot was about, in 2 years, we can get together again and we can talk and see what possibilities there are for you. So those type of things give parents that are going through termination some hope. And then being able to see that there is life after termination is kind of the best way to look at it, that it is a successful thing. Doesn't happen all the time, but there are times that it can be successful.
Jessica, do you have anything that you want to share about that particular question?
Not so much, but I know like what I tell parents is kids are always going to want their parents. So they're going to come looking for you one day. So even if you didn't get them back, just being the best person you can be, trying to maintain recovery, sobriety, sometimes it's just not fair. The system isn't fair. Some parents I feel like do not deserve to get their kids taken permanently. But in those situations, I just always try to encourage parents that they're going to come find you one day.
I think from a judge's perspective, I think it's very, very important, regardless of what the goal is for everybody to continue working with the parents, especially if the children are older, because they are going to go find their parents. And hopefully, no matter what happens, at least we've set the family up for some modicum of success, possibly down the road. So please keep that in mind. I think we'll go to this next question. What advice, and Jennifer, I'm going to start with you on this one. What advice do you have for attorneys and judges to help encourage reunification in child welfare cases?
Well, to remember the policy of the state is reunification if it can be safely done. And remember that you're in this work because that families are important. I mean, they are the essential part of what makes a society work. They are a God-given gift, and then we need to protect it at all costs. I think Jessica here today telling us about what she lived, her lived truth, and where she is now I hope we'll always remember her when we're working with clients because she has a wonderful ability to describe what she went through. And I think you can see she's using that. God's letting her use that to change the lives of lots of people in a positive way. Not all clients have that ability to express what's going on inside of them. So I think that, and I think most of the judges, and I know certainly for you, Judge James, that is why we do the things we do. And we don't want that to get lost in all of the hullabaloo that goes along with it. We need to keep centered on what the best practice is for this family and how to keep it as intact as is possible.
Jessica, your thoughts and advice
I
for
would
attorneys and judges on reunification?
I would definitely say always remember that we're all human and we're not perfect, and that it's possible that maybe some of the caseworkers are lying to you because a lot of times I'll have parents come to me and we have, I encourage them to document everything, to keep everything, to email everything to themselves in case they lose their phone. So we always, if parents come to my class, we have a track record, and there's been multiple times that caseworkers have lied, but the judge has believed the caseworker because they're not going to believe the parent. So I would say always like making sure that the truth is the truth. And if it's not, holding your caseworkers accountable is super important. I can tell you, since I had a close relationship with my attorney and my kid's attorney, that I was referenced to in court as the meth mom. They were always whispering about me because he finally told me. My attorney told me, he's like, they are, Jessica, you're right. Because he didn't want to believe that at first. They wouldn't return my phone calls, and they said that they did. I didn't have anyone to tell me to document things at that time, so I didn't know any better. And it was made very clear to me that reunification was probably not going to happen for me. It was told that I would never get clean, I would never get sober, I would never get my kids back, I would never stop doing drugs. That my first paycheck stub would come from Jaguars, which is a strip club in Abilene, which I used to think like, oh, I guess my CPS worker thinks I'm pretty. Now in life, I find that highly, highly offensive. So kind of like Jennifer was wording too, like I won't preach, but this is how I kind of look at like the court system. Like if God's the mighty authority and he's given a judge that position here on earth, like that's a super high calling, like that he's placed on your life. Um, I think that if courtrooms were more backed by love and grace and compassion and understanding, and if the courtroom was a place to bring healing and genuine restoration to families, um, we would have many more like reunifications. I think it's about community. If everyone's supposed to be working together to reunify a family, then it has to be community. It can't be all this division. And sadly, people are lacking empathy and compassion. I just spoke at this conference a couple weeks ago, and I spoke on how caseworkers are just the same as me. And I know that by being on the other side, that they're not any different. In fact, some of them have way more problems than I probably thought of ever having. And so breaking down that barrier, like we've talked about here today, that we're all human, that we're all the same. A badge doesn't make a difference, a uniform doesn't make a difference, a title surely doesn't make a difference. By just showing people love, encouraging them, um, I think judges have an amazing, amazing position to do things that are out of probably their comfort zone. And a lot of maybe lawyers and attorneys, I mean, yeah, lawyers and caseworkers won't agree with it. But over time, if that's all you're going to be tolerate in your courtroom, you can change how many reunifications take place just by setting that tone. So I think I think it all starts with the judges and just showing parents some grace and getting a better understanding of what they've been through is important.
And with that, we have a very special video that we'd like to share with you guys now. So, and we'll take questions, Jamie, if we've got time afterwards. So this is well worth a watch, ladies and gentlemen, please.
Thank you for having the heart to do the work that you do. I can't imagine waking up every morning feeling excited to go to a job where I'm underpaid, overworked, underappreciated, and stressed out. I can't imagine the fear and anxiety some of you feel when you knock on a door for the first time, not knowing what's on the other side. I can't imagine the joy you experience when you're getting yelled at, cussed out, lied to, and hated on, all in your attempts to keep children safe. I can't imagine the frustration you feel when a parent refuses your help, and the only option that you're left with is seeking a court-ordered removal or termination of parental rights. I can't imagine investing so much time and energy into rebuilding other people's families and not feeling guilty when it starts to negatively impact your own. I can't imagine ever having peace carrying the constant pressure of determining what the best outcome for a case is. I would constantly be second guessing and questioning if I made the right judgment call. I can't imagine how it feels to be held accountable by a court of law representing a system that is ever changing, ever evolving, and oftentimes confusing, even to you guys and you work there. So wait, if my perspective is in any way accurate, you guys work a lot for little pay, you're stressed out, you help people who most times don't want your help by putting yourself in unsafe situations that are traumatic, and you knock on strangers' doors on private property in Texas, geez, and you say that us parents have issues. I do want to thank you guys for being one of the most consistent things in my whole entire life. You've been around longer than any boyfriend I've ever had, longer than my addiction, and heck, I've known you longer than even my own children. I'll never forget the day that we met. It feels like only yesterday. It was one of the worst days of my life. You showed up at the hospital asking me all kinds of questions, and I didn't want to talk to you or anyone else. So I ignored you and all your questions in hopes that you would just go away. And guess what? You did. But always only for a short time. Now, if I'm being completely honest, I held a resentment towards you for a lot of years. The same day my mom went to court and signed her rights away to me, her, my stepdad, and little sister, well, they packed up what they could, left the state, and they left me. You eventually picked me up and you took me to my foster home. You did a really good job picking them for me. I never imagined living on a goat farm and shoveling goat poop could be so therapeutic. And even though it smelled awful there, I could breathe for the first time in a very long time. Can you believe I still talk to my foster family over 30 years later? Now I guess I owe you an apology for all the times I cussed you out, for all the times I made your job and life miserable on purpose, and for all the extra paperwork I'm sure you had to do because of me. I hope that you can forgive me. I was just scared, and every time you knocked on my door, I thought you were trying to take my kids from me, and I vowed never to let them go through what I went through as a kid. I also want to thank you for giving me my why moment. You may not know this, but the day you took my kids, I rushed up to your office being way too extra, I know. But I just wanted to see my kids. So thank you for letting me. When my daughter and my son were crying, and when my daughter looked at me and said, I hope you're happy now, Mom. I hope you're really happy. And when she said that and you said I had to leave, well, let's just say I'm sorry for trying to hit you and for cussing at you again. I get why you threw me out the back door of your office, but when you did, my whole world crumbled. I literally broke into a million pieces that day on your sidewalk. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe, and I felt like the whole world just fell on top of me. But then I heard the back door open and I felt a little hope. I hoped that you were coming to tell me that I was going to be okay, that me and my kids were going to be okay. I hope that maybe you would help me, but most importantly, I hope that you would just give me a hug. But you must have been in a really big hurry to get home that day because instead of stopping to help me, well, you just simply walked over me. And in that moment, I felt a feeling that no human being should ever have to feel, ever. And that became my why moment. And that is why I'm passionate about helping parents. So thank you for that. In fact, if you're ever working with a parent who is extra like I was, well, maybe you can focus on all the good times that we had over the years. And maybe you can find hope in the fact that I didn't turn out how you expected me to. When you called me the meth mom in court and you said that I couldn't stop doing drugs, well, guess what? I did. When you said I would never get my kids back, well, guess what? I did that too. You see, all the mean and nasty things you said about me never even happened, and most of them weren't true. But I guess maybe all the stress from your job wouldn't let you see clearly. It happened. So thank you for going down memory lane with me. That was fun. Oh, but wait, one more thing quick. There's something I forgot to tell you. Now that I'm healed from all the pain and trauma from my childhood, and now that I don't use drugs to numb my pain, well, I can see clearly now, and I can see how all these encounters we have had to happen, so that I can help other parents whose shoes I once walked in. And I'm not mad at you anymore. I don't hate you anymore. And in fact, I love the ways that we collaborate. We actually get along pretty well. And I forgive you. And I pray that one day, find it in your heart to forgive me too. Thank you for being an instrumental part in fulfilling the higher calling that God has placed on my life. Thank you for being the driving force that pushed me into healing from my past. Because I don't think I would have ever done it or could have done it without you. I couldn't see it then, but I can undoubtedly see it now. You are one of the biggest blessings I have ever had throughout my whole entire life. And I am eternally grateful for you. Love, your friend, Jessica.
Do you have time for questions?
Yes. And I've just taken a moment to absorb that video every time I watch it. Thank you, Jessica, for everything
Amazing.
that you are doing and for using your voice to help others. But yeah, I want to make use of our time, the rest of our time together, and you have asked great questions, so I'll just read them out and then whoever wants to respond can. The first is, this person's writing from a jurisdiction that has cookie cutter service plans. So what would you advise to a parent or an attorney or a CASA who's in a jurisdiction that finds themselves with a cookie cutter service plan?
Jennifer, you want to take that one?
I think that's a really hard position to be in, and I think that United Way, I think that I would contact them to see what services they have. Mental health authorities have wraparound services in more rural areas. It might be far and few between, but I would also reach out to your MHMR. I think those were the two places I would look.
If you think that they're too cookie cutter, if you're a lawyer, fight it.
Mhm.
You know, let the judge know what you think your client needs or doesn't need. If you're a parent, talk to your lawyer. If you're a CASA, talk to the ad litem or talk to the attorneys and figure out what the parent really needs. Because they're just, they're literally not just check boxes. They're there to help people. And if they're not going to help, it's pointless.
Can I add on to that? Yeah, I would say as a parent, from the parent perspective, it's so hard to get sober, to maintain that, to go to meetings, to get a job, to go to counseling, to get the psych eval. Like there's so much going on that it becomes overwhelming to a parent. So I would definitely, like Judge James said, I would fight that or petition it in some form or fashion because I feel like it's setting parents up for failure. If I'm not in a domestic violence situation, why should I take domestic violence classes? If I'm not doing even if I'm smoked marijuana 3 times or whatever, like I shouldn't be going to rehab, and that's not reality anyway. So I definitely encourage, like Judge James said, to somehow, even talk to the judge and be like, hey, this isn't how they're doing it in other regions. You know, we suggest doing this and, having the parent voice in this. And I'm always here too if y'all want the parent voice on anything.
And let me add one thing to that too. The other thing, not only the services shouldn't be cookie cutter, the time frame to complete them shouldn't be start them all at one time. It should be to work on the services that are most needed. Make sure there's time for visitation and for employment. Make sure that there is transportation to get to these services. Those are just as important. So if you can, as an attorney, go to that service planning meeting to make sure that those things are met, that there's a way to get to the services, that the services are not just, we're going to start all of them right now and we're going to just see what happens, that they should be stair-stepped in order of need, and that your client has the resources they need to get to and from and to work.
I'm a big proponent of phase service plans, especially when you've got parents that are suffering from addiction issues or mental health issues. If you can't attack both of those with some level of success in the very beginning, doing all the rest of them is just you're a hamster on a wheel.
The next question is what I'll refer to as a pull yourself up by the bootstraps mentality. So the question is that this person often hears that we shouldn't be hand-holding parents anymore, that they need to prove they can do this. And in their jurisdiction, that's not necessarily how they approach it, but it's a approach that is, causes frustration and is a barrier. How do you push back on professionals that think supporting a parent during a monitored return is a bad thing?
I'm going to jump in on this one. They're in court for a reason. And it's because they don't have anybody to hold their hand or kick them in the tushy and help them. That's why we exist. So I'll be quiet now.
I have to add something else to that. And I say this to my colleagues all the time, and they're generally in agreement with it. When you look at some of these service plans and you consider how you would accomplish that in your life, when you take into consideration that you're riding the bus and it takes sometimes 3 hours there and 3 hours back in a big metropolitan area, people that say that have not looked and thought about it, because I can tell you that I could not perform some of these service plans, and I have help and I have the means to get to and from. So that type of mentality needs to be rethought.
No, I was going to add on to that too. There's a difference between hand holding and walking alongside someone and supporting them. So I don't know what that really means, hand holding, because most parents aren't going to want you even that close to them, but let alone they don't parents that are genuinely trying to get better want options. They have to learn that they're going to fail. Most people are going to relapse. Most people are going to struggle in areas. So I think the hand holding mentality, if it was even just shifted to walking alongside and supporting a parent, would be good.
Sometimes reasonable efforts are holding hands. Sometimes it's just walking next to them. Everybody is an individual, and as soon as we start tackling it that way, I think things will improve dramatically.
Well, I regret to say that this is the end of our time together today. I feel like this was just the tip of the iceberg. This is such an important conversation, and I hope we can continue it in the future. But on behalf of the Children's Commission, I want to wholeheartedly thank our panelists for this very informative and impactful presentation. We also want to thank you for attending today, for joining this presentation. If you are an attorney, the State Bar has approved this course for 1 hour of MCLE. Individuals who are watching this on replay for this course can contact cctraining@txcourts.gov, cctraining@txcourts.gov to self-report your MCLE. And with that, it concludes our webinar. Thank you very much. Have a great day.